Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Captain's Log. And tonight we're going to get into something a little different than following emotions and things like that. I think this is going to be awfully fun. This is getting back into some old territory for me. And for my regular listeners, back, oh boy, how many months ago was that? 14 months ago, to the Intrepid radio program. You've probably heard me talk about this topic before, but it's a safe topic to start breaking the ice into some old territory. Hey, Hawk Buckman, good to see you over there in the chat room. And Barbie D, good to see you as well. There are men in history who build monuments, and there are men in history who became monuments. And then there are men who vanished. So what do you do with a man whose name is carved in stone, whose statues stood in the shadow of a queen, whose tombs were prepared and then never used? And silence. So tonight we talk about a man erased. The Captain's Log tonight is Senenmut, the man who vanished. In the 18th dynasty of Egypt, under the reign of the extraordinary female pharaoh Hatshepsut, there rose a man of astonishing prominence. His name was Senenmut. He was not born royal. He was not of noble blood, yet he rose to become the overseer of works, the steward of Amun, the tutor to Nefruri, the royal daughter, architect of monuments, the power behind some of Egypt's most magnificent constructions, and his fingerprints are everywhere. And he bore 92 royal titles bestowed on him by Hatshepsut. At Deir el-Bahri, at the temple complex, in inscriptions, his statues carved in intimate devotion. He was not a minor official. He was a man trusted, and in ancient Egypt, trust at that level was not given lightly. He was Pharaoh in the place of Pharaoh as the Grand Vizier. Now here's his rise. Senenmut rose under Hatshepsut during a politically volatile era, a woman claiming full pharaonic authority in a male-dominated throne system, and to support her claim required intelligence, strategy, loyalty, architectural propaganda, and Senenmut delivered all of that to her. He was visible. He was powerful, close to the throne. Some even speculate dangerously close to the throne. There were speculations of the romanticism, the romantic relationship between Senenmut and Hatshepsut. And then what happens? Silence. He disappears. Not gradually, abruptly. His tombs left unfinished or unused. His name chiseled out in places. His presence erased from some inscriptions. His statues, 9 of them found buried in a pit over the last 50 years. So there is no grand burial. There's no state funeral for him. There's no official disgrace record, just absence and silence. And here's where archaeology becomes fascinating, because absence can scream louder than presence. When a man who held over 80 titles vanishes from the historical record, that is not a footnote. That is rupture. Now here's the chronology. Biblical chronology places Moses at age 40 when he fled Egypt. The traditional Exodus date, around 1446 BC. Well, it's becoming more traditional. Let's put it that way. It was not the accepted date because they usually placed the Exodus under Ramses for certain biblical passages, which was almost 200 years too late on the calendar. So the work backward from 1446 BC, 40 years, you land squarely in the reign of Hatshepsut. Senenmut's prominence fades around the time Hatshepsut dies. A man in his late 30s or early 40s, gone. No burial in the tombs prepared for him, no body, no clear explanation. Now, I'm not speaking in suppositions alone. The dates align. The political context aligns. The education aligns. A man raised in the royal court of Egypt, educated in Egyptian wisdom, architecture, administration, elite insider. The Bible says Moses was educated in all the wisdom of Egypt. What if Moses was not an outsider adopted into royalty, but an insider who fled? What if Senenmut did not fall from grace? What if he walked away? Now, there's a lot more historical fact. If I were to give a long treatise on this, or a long lesson, I'd say turn in your syllabus to page 72. So what erased men what erased men leave behind? When a powerful man vanishes from the record, it usually means one of three things. He was disgraced, he was assassinated, he became dangerous. Now, dangerous doesn't always mean violent. Sometimes it means disruptive. Sometimes it means revolutionary. Sometimes it means he carried a story the empire did not want preserved. If Moses confronted the throne, if Moses returned demanding the release of labor forces, if Moses led a people out of Egypt, Egypt would not carve that into stone. As I've said before, there is no pharaoh who would write on the walls of his temple, "And my slave caste kicked my ass today." Empires preserve victories. They erase humiliation. If Senenmut was 40 when he disappeared from Egypt, and Moses was 40 when he disappeared from Egypt, and Moses was 80 when he returned to deliver his people and lead his people out, there are strong connective ties between the two men. Now, absence as evidence. In archaeology, we're trained to study what's found. But seasoned researchers learn to study what's missing. Empty tombs, chiseled out names, unfinished monuments, political gaps, silence. And sometimes silence is thunder. History doesn't only whisper through inscriptions, it roars through erasures. So the meaning of all this, when someone vanishes from history, it does not mean they were insignificant. It often means they were very significant and very dangerous. Dangerous to power, dangerous to narrative, dangerous to control. And here's the human layer tonight. Every empire, ancient or modern, decides which stories survive. But truth has a way of resurfacing, sometimes buried in desert sands, sometimes hidden in plain sight, sometimes carried in sacred text, and sometimes carried in us, in you, in me. Because you may feel erased. You may feel overlooked. You may feel like your contributions have vanished into silence, but silence does not equal insignificance. It may mean you're standing at the edge of something that disrupts the status quo. How is that for the word being given? Here are some affirmations we can draw out of this, believe it or not. Tonight, say these with me. My absence does not define my worth. Silence does not erase significance. I am not forgotten. I am unfolding. What is hidden in me has power. I do not fear disruption when truth is involved. And if I must walk away from comfort, I walk toward destiny. Here's the benediction. May you never confuse obscurity with insignificance. May you have the courage to walk away from what no longer aligns with truth. May your silence be preparation, not defeat. And if history forgets you for a season, may eternity remember. And as always, stay the course. Now, stick around. We're going to have a brief Captain's Cabin tonight, and I'm going to be cutting the Captain's Cabins a little shorter and reformatting what we're going to be doing with this program. And so all of you go over to my Patreon page, go to Patreon and look up Epic Life Scotty. That's my page. You can subscribe there, and you can support this show. It costs you as little as $4 a month, or as grand as you want to make it. If you want to donate $4,000 a month, I'll take it. But everything you do over there helps support this show and help us do better things. And that's why I put it at such a small amount. $4, it's a cup of coffee at Starbucks. I don't think even. So go on over there. Our listeners over on Instagram, I'm going to let you go tonight. Thank you for being here. Make your way over to there's Pamela Zaspel over on the Instagram page. And Dan Madsen is over there. I think that's Dan Madsen. And other people who have been in and out over there, we're going to cut you off over at Instagram. Go on over to my YouTube page and find this program. I don't have the link in front of me. I'll get you the link. Hold on. Let's get you the link. And here, I'm going to go over to YouTube. I'm going to go over to my page, which is right. Hold on. There it is. My channel. And I'm going to click on this show, which is still going live there. And I'm going to copy this link. Bada boom. And over there on Instagram, I'm going to paste it in here for you. Shebang. And post it. All right. So there is the link. Copy that. You can come on over to the YouTube channel, and you can join us in the chat room over there. Other than that, Instagram, good night for now. So there they go. Instagram is gone. And it's just us now over here on YouTube and Facebook. If you're joining us from there, same thing. Come on over to the YouTube channel, and you can chat live with us right here. Come with questions, because if you have questions tonight, let's see, remove. All right. It pops up window after window after window. Okay, there we go. And just trying to get rid of Instagram. 6 different windows pop up. All right, so I'm going to give you a link right now. I'm going to invite, copy, boom, over here in the chat room. I'm going to paste that, and bang, there is our link to call into the show tonight. If you want to talk about history tonight and Senenmut, if you've got questions, that's the link. We're going to be around for 15, maybe 20 minutes tonight. We'll go longer if it merits going longer. I'm going to leave this a little open-ended. It's up to you guys. And I just want to say hello to everybody who's here. Hawk, I saw you. Barbie D, I saw you. And who else we got in here tonight? Morgan Snow, good to have you tonight. And I'm just scrolling backwards. There we go. We've got Hawk. And damn it, my mic went off. Hawk, how you doing? Bro. Brought you in. You can hear me now. My mic went off.
Yeah, there we go. That's a lot better. I'm okay, brother. How are you?
I'm good.
Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you just fine. You're a little muffled. It sounds like you're not on your studio mic.
Okay. Can't hear you. Where'd you go?
I'm here.
Hello?
I'm still hooked up.
You there, Scotty?
I am. I can hear you.
I'm not hearing you.
My mic is on. Mic is running.
Okay, now I got you. I got you.
All right, good.
I got you.
Good. Kelly Bell, nice to have you here. Welcome.
All right, good. Yeah, no problem. I've got
I'm getting a lot of feedback from you, though. I'm hearing myself.
Okay, real quick, I want to. Yeah, I had a feeling that was happening here.
Yeah.
Hold on a second. Let me.
Sounds like there's a slight delay between you and me as well.
StreamYard, that's the problem.
Barbie D said she can barely hear you.
Regardless, it doesn't matter. So here's the question I've got. What happened to Moses? Okay. This is what I want to know. If this Egyptian dude that could possibly or potentially be Moses.
Yeah.
Why was he renamed Moses? And what happened to the Egyptians? Senenmut, I think that's what you called him.
Yes.
What happened to his legacy and why was it erased? And I'll take my answer off the air. How about that?
All right. Well, I will let you go then. I'll remove you. That is the topic of a whole book that I wrote with my late friend John Ward, and he presented his view on Moses. I presented mine. Mine is Senenmut. Now, Senenmut, it is said what we know about him in Egyptian history, he was born to commoners, is what they called it. And he was educated in the school of the nobles, and he was brought into the palace to be a tutor to the royal daughter of Hatshepsut, Neferuri. And here's the thing about royal tutors. They were not school marms. They were not wet behind the ears, college grads looking for their first job. A tutor in the royal house was generally somebody who was very established, more than likely somebody who had been a general or a high official in the army, somebody who had already had their nobility tested and stayed and true. So when he was brought into the palace, he already had a history in Egypt. He already had a legacy. It's not spelled out for us in Egyptian history. All we know is that Hatshepsut brought him into the palace. He became the tutor to her daughter. Then her daughter died around age 16, so he was only there for a short time. And she ended up elevating him, Senenmut, to very high office. She elevated him to the high priest of Amun, the grand royal architect, amongst many, many others, 92 royal titles, including the Grand Vizier, which basically meant Pharaoh in the place of Pharaoh. Now, her brother, who was her husband, Hatshepsut, her brother Tutmosis II, He died, sickly. She eventually took over as the pharaoh because she and, her husband who died, Tutmosis II, had a son of a harem wife, Tutmosis III, who was only about 5 or 6 years old at the death of his father. So Hatshepsut was co-regent with him for 6 years, and she just took over. She became the pharaoh of Egypt, saying her father wanted her to be Tutmosis I, wanted her to be the next pharaoh. Now, you get to the question of Hawks about Moses. What happened to Moses? Well, there is the story that, of course, we all know, that the Pharaoh's daughter was bathing in her pool and off the Grand Canal of the Pharaohs, off the Nile, and she finds this basket with a baby in it. That's the story we're told in the biblical account. And the biblical account says that the basket was not floating down the Nile. That baby would have been eaten by crocodiles. It said he was placed amongst the reeds by the pool where Pharaoh's daughter bathed. Now, an interesting historical fact. In this dating system, this would have been around 1526 BC, which would have been the birth date of Moses, that birth year. And the daughter of Pharaoh was none other than Hatshepsut. Her non-regnal name was Matkare. And Matkare was the daughter of Pharaoh, given the title Pharaoh's daughter. There are very few women who bore that title in Egyptian history. She was one of them. So when the biblical account mentions Pharaoh's daughter, it's mentioning her by title. Pharaoh's daughter. That was Matkari. The dates fit. If this is the woman who found Moses in the Nile, that's who he was. And she brought him in. And it says, and she sent him back to his mother to be weaned, and until she was old enough to claim him as her own. And so she was only about 7 to 10 years old at the time she found Moses in the Nile. Returns him to his mother. He comes back in a few years. She renames him Senenmut. And we know this only because you look at the name Senenmut. What does Senenmut mean in Egyptian language? It means mother's brother. In essence, what it means, I, your mother, am making you brother to the gods with me. And this is the name, that's a bestowed name, Senenmut. And so it doesn't say in Egyptian history that Senenmut was Moses. But what we do know is the dating system in the Bible lines up to this person, and that Senenmut was the name she gave Moses after she reclaimed him and brought him into the palace and raised him as her own. And then he grew up in the school of the nobles. The Bible says Moses had been educated in all the grandeur of Egypt. And this is somebody who had fought for the Pharaoh. He had been a general. He had fought in the armies. And by the time he turns 40, what happens? He starts to associate himself with his own people, the Hebrew slaves. Now, it doesn't say this was a big secret. The Egyptians did that all the time. That was a cinematic thing for the movies. Oh, the big secret. Moses was Hebrew. He is a Hebrew. But being a Hebrew would not have mattered if Pharaoh elevated you. So he was elevated in status. And so what do we know about Senenmut? Child of commoners. What was a commoner? It was a slave. Slave could be a commoner. A worker could be a commoner. And so this is the man who was elevated in power, Senenmut. And there are several dates that match up. There are all different kinds of things that match up. Well, what did Moses do in the biblical account? It says in some of the Jewish writings of that account, it says Moses showed up with his entourage and saw an Egyptian taskmaster beating a Hebrew slave. And he stops him, and what does he do? He kills him. buries him in the sand. There is some speculation that Moses knew that he was being positioned to be the deliverer, which was prophesied, and he was stepping into the role prematurely. He killed this Egyptian. It's found out. He runs. And I believe this has something to do with the factions that were taking place behind the throne of Hatshepsut, who was the female pharaoh at the time, his mother, who made him brother. And there's lots of other details in this that we could go into that establishes this date. But when she becomes pharaoh, remember the young rightful pharaoh, it would be her brother husband's child from a harem wife, Tutmosis III. He'd been sent up to Memphis, which is at the north of Egypt, not down in Luxor in the south, up in the north, where the palace was in the north. And that's also where Memphis sits right at the Nile Delta, the fanning of the Nile Delta right there. And if you go a little bit east, you'd land up in the land of Goshen, which is where the Hebrews dwelt, and the slave caste. And there are many, I mentioned this not long ago, many things about Moses where it said, when Moses confronted Pharaoh later in life, in his 80s, it said he left the courts of Pharaoh and that same day delivered the message of Pharaoh to the Hebrew leaders. All he did was hop in a boat and go up the canal to Avaris, the city up there. That was the slave city. And so there's all these details. So Hawk, there is the simplified answer to your question. What happened to Moses? Moses was Senenmut, and I believe that history bears that out. And Tracy says, I'm so impressed at how you have all this memorized. Sounds very complicated. It's complicated, but I did write a book about this called The Exodus Reality. You can find that. Just go look it up on Amazon, and you'll see. And John Ward and I wrote that book together. He had a different theory than mine, and we had fun arguing our theories in debate and radio interviews and in the book itself. And as a matter of fact, when we went and did book signings, John and I, he signed one book for somebody. I remember talking about this recently. We did a book signing, and he signs on the title page of the book, and he signs, by the way, Scotty's theory is magnificent. You find it beginning on page 286. And so you thumb all the way back to 286, and what is it? It's the final page in the book that's the blank page back there, and he wrote 286, period, up at the top of the page, and there's nothing there. So that was one of his jokes. Well done, John. Well done. Well played. And so, but the book has, you know what that trip was when I went on that? That was my first time in Egypt in 2013, January of 2013. And I was there for a month. And John took me all over Egypt. He's an archaeologist there with his wife. And they lived in Luxor, and he took me all over the place. We went out into the Sinai, and we climbed a mountain in the Sinai, and saw temples and that people don't get to see. They're up on the top of a mountain in the middle of the godforsaken Sinai wilderness. People don't get to go there. We were the guests of the Sheikh Salim Barakat, who allowed us to sleep in his Bedouin tent with his sons guarding us for the night in hospitality. And so it was a magnificent trip. The book itself has about 100 pictures in it, black and white, and there are 2 8-page sections in the book, full color. So by 8 pages, it would be 2 sides, so 16. And these 8-page sections are full color, and you can see our trip. Our trip was kind of like, the old Hope and Crosby films, on the road films, little comedy, in fedoras. So we had a good trip with that. And then we wrote this book. Kelly Bell says, it's an excellent book. Thank you, Kelly Bell. I appreciate that. And I try to make it easy to understand, Barbie D. It's such a great story. When I first wrote about Moses, I didn't use Senenmut. I didn't know that information yet. But I was 11 years old. And I was in a 7th grade Sunday school class. And we were all asked to do a little report for next week. Few sentences. And I was given the Pharaoh of the Exodus. Who was he? And this guy was one of the seminary students at the big seminary that was there, attached to the church. He said, go talk to a man named Chucky Ailing, and he'll help you out with this. He's an archaeologist and all of that. I didn't even know what archaeologist meant back then. So the next Sunday, Sunday, I met with Chuck Ailing. And a little egg-headed professor. And I say that affectionately. He became a dear friend as I got older. He became the president of the seminary where I attended. Then he eventually became the chair of history at Northwestern University up in the outskirts of St. Paul, Minnesota. And he was an archaeologist. He had a theory. He wrote a book, Egypt and Bible History. And that was out back then. And so he gave me the lowdown. He didn't use the name Senenmut. He didn't use Hatshepsut. Later, as we talked about that when I was in seminary, he thought that was a romanticized version. And I think he came around after that saying, well, maybe it's not. And so that's where I got my theory about, and you look at the pharaohs of the time. Tutmosis the first, Tutmosis the second, Tutmosis the third. These were the pharaohs he would have grown up under. Hatshepsut, the pharaoh's daughter. All of these people. And the people he was surrounded with. Rechmir, the Grand Vizier. I started writing this book as a novel. And I pushed it aside because I didn't have time to do it. My agent, 10 years ago, right after the Exodus reality came out of John Ward's and mine, she said, I want you to write this as a trilogy of novels that would appeal to the young adult audience, the audience that would read books like the Twilight series and things, think young adults. And so I started writing that, and I had made some speculations in history and had fun with it. And there was divided into 3 novels. One of these days I'll finish it. So there you go. That's not everything I know about Senenmut, but that's what I believe. That's who I believe he is and was. That's here's another interesting thing. Remember I mentioned Ramses, how everybody thought that the Pharaoh of the Exodus was Ramses II. Ramses the Great. Played by Yul Brynner. So it shall be written, so it shall be done. In the old movie. He made great screen presence with that role. But Ramses would have been, he lived in the 1250s BC. The Exodus took place in the 1440s BC. And there are several historical facts that point to that. Not just the chronology of Senenmut and Hatshepsut and Tutmosis dynasty, but one glaring thing stands out. Do you remember after the Exodus, if you remember your Sunday school, there was, when Moses died at age 120, they'd been wandering since he was 80 until he was 120 for 40 years in the wilderness. And then they come to the promised land, the land of Canaan. Not Palestine. Palestine didn't exist. There was no such thing as Palestine. Land of Canaan. And this was Israel's homeland. And, well, they came there, and when Moses dies, Joshua takes over. And Joshua leads the armies against the city of Jericho. And that was their first conquest. They besiege the city. They circle around it 7 times. They have the Ark of the Covenant with them, which had been built while they were in the wilderness. And they blow the shofars, the ram's horn trumpets. And what happens? The walls came tumbling down. And we know the old spiritual song of that. And Joshua fought the battle of Jericho, and the walls came tumbling down. So, now, interesting thing, Jericho has existed as a city for thousands of years. But Jericho, from the time it was destroyed, sat fallow and unpopulated for about 800 years. Now, if that happened, now, here's the interesting thing. Kathleen Kenyon, if you remember that name, that strikes a bell. Female archaeologist, many famous archaeologists were, they did excavations at the city of Jericho. The old site to Tel, I can't remember the name of it. Tel is the hill. It's the old city within the city of Jericho, which still exists today, of course, modern city. But there's the big hill, the dirt hill, and it's full of all the ruins of the old city. And in there they found the walls had been come down. They blame it on earthquakes and things like that. But then they find things that seem to line it up with they fell outward. Things like that, all kinds of little facts. Now, the interesting thing is they date the destruction of that city of Jericho with the walls tumbling down. That's dated to 1405 BC. Now, do a little math with me. If the Exodus was in 1446, roughly 40 years and maybe a few months, a half a year later, is the destruction of Jericho, the conquest of Jericho. So if Joshua conquested Jericho, the walls came tumbling down, and the city was unpopulated for almost 800 years following, and this is 1405, Ramses would have been on the throne in the 1250s, about 150 years later. Jericho was a dead city for 150 years. So if Moses had led the Exodus out under Ramses, well, then couldn't have taken place by the virtue of the destruction of the city of Jericho. That's what archaeology, I love archaeology and history. And so there's many other facts that come into the dating of the Exodus, the dating of all the things that happened back then. And that gives you a pretty solid picture. Chris Rufert, welcome. Good to see you, brother. He says, I love the book. I wish I could have met John. He seems to be a good chap. Yes, he was. And I miss John immensely. And I just talked to his wife, Maria, Dr. Maria Nilsson. She is the head of that archaeological mission at Gebel El Silsila. And John was her director there. And yeah. So John left a big hole, a lot of people. So thank you, Chris. I didn't know you were here. If I'd seen you sooner, I'd have said hi sooner. So these are the facts that point me to the Thutmosian dynasty as being the time when Moses lived, that he is the counterpart to Senenmut. And, oh, by the way, there's one more thing. One other reason that people think that Ramses is the pharaoh of the Exodus. At the end of the book of Genesis, right before the book of Exodus, and I think it's in the beginning of the book of Exodus, it talks about how the Hebrews, the Israelites, built the treasure cities of Pithom and Ramses, which became known as Pi-Ramses. Well, whose city was that? Ramses the Great. Well, then, if they built those cities for him, obviously they lived under the reign of Ramses. Well, the interesting thing is this. It's extrapolation of names. There's an older city that they have discovered in recent decades beneath the ruins of what is old Pi-Ramses. And that city is called Avaris. And Avaris, once they started digging that up, had all the earmarks of a city of Semitic peoples from the Middle East by style of houses, style of graves, all of this kind of thing. And so the city of Avaris would have been the city in the land of Goshen where the Hebrews dwelt, who were slaves to the Pharaoh, workers for the Pharaoh. And they were about an afternoon's journey by boat from Memphis and the palace at Memphis up the Grand Canal of the Pharaohs to Avaris. And if you look at a map as well, hey, Greg, good to see you. And if you look at a map of the area, you've got the land of Goshen, which is not called that today, Pi-Ramses, which is old Avaris. There's an arc of an old wadi that you can follow on the map that brings you right to the Red Sea. So the Hebrews, when they would have left this region, would have followed the Wadi Tumalat and carried it all the way to the northern tip of the Red Sea and the Bitter Lakes and the shallow portions of the Red Sea. So without getting into that story. So if you've got Avaris, why did the Bible call it Pithom and Ramses, the cities of Pi-Ramses? Well, remember, after Israel was established, they were raided, they were destroyed by the Babylonians, and they were carried off into captivity as a people, and the city and the temple were all destroyed in the Old Testament period, we'll put it that way. And when they were finally released and sent back home, they rebuilt the temple, and then there were 72 rabbis who went to the Library of Alexandria asking the Pharaoh, and the Pharaoh was Ptolemy II. He was one of Alexander the Great's appointees given Egypt. And he was the Pharaoh of Egypt, the Greek Pharaoh. And they asked him for permission to go to the Library of Alexandria to look up all the old scrolls and the old books so they could reconstruct their scriptures and their history. And so what did they do? Of course, they had all the oral history that they'd had for generations, but they went there and they rewrote what we have today as our Old Testament. They wrote a book in the late 500s, early 400s, the Septuagint or the Septuaginta. And the Septuagint is basically the Old Testament that you have if you pick up a Bible off the bookstore shelf today. The Septuagint was the Old Testament, rewritten years after it actually happened. And the city of Pi-Ramses was how they knew that region. This is 1,000 years later. The Exodus took place in 1446 BC, and they're writing the Septuagint between 500 and 450 BC. That's 1,000-year span. Some of these names had been forgotten. Avaris was long forgotten. All they knew was the Hebrews built the treasure cities of Pithom and Ramses. But that was actually Avaris. And what did Ramses do? Ramses the Great was the great builder. He was also the great usurper of temples, of buildings, of projects, of cities. He reclaimed Avaris and renamed it after himself, Pi-Ramses. And so people are looking at it. I've used this example. It's like I grew up in Minneapolis and St. Paul area. St. Paul, in its original days, was a logging town. It was called Pig's Eye. And so today, the state capital is St. Paul of Minnesota. But does anybody refer to it as Pig's Eye? No. Pig's Eye has been gone for 150 years. Same thing with Avaris. Avaris was long gone. Everybody knew it as Pi-Ramses. That's why it got written as they built the treasure cities of Pithom and Ramses. It doesn't say Pharaoh had them build them. Pharaoh Ramses says they built the treasure cities of Pithom and Ramses. And people extrapolated from that Ramses must have been the Pharaoh. No, they built the cities that he reclaimed and renamed Pyramses. That was Avaris. So there you go. All kinds of very cool history. I say, this is what I love about archaeology and history. It opens the door and it cracks the light a little bit. And helps us understand what really happened there. So I'm going to make a recommendation just for fun. If you go on YouTube, there is, what's the game? They did all the historical Assassin's Creed. Look up Assassin's Creed, but look up, they've done these long videos that they've taken out of the backgrounds they built for these games. Just glorious, amazing work. And there's one where you can go through the city of, what city did they have in there? Memphis. Memphis would have been, if you've got the Nile running all the way north up to the fan of the Delta, Cairo's right there. Well, just right at the beginning of the fan is Memphis. That's the old capital of the north. And if you go down south, you go down here to Luxor. It's about 400 miles south. And or ancient Thebes. And then Memphis. So look up the city of Memphis. And I think that's what it's called on their video. I've sat and just had that playing on a TV. Or when I'm painting here sometimes, illustrating, just playing right here. It's all the sounds, all the movements, all the city, the people walking through ancient Memphis. And it's so cool because they have it dated at like 200 AD, I think, something like that, or 200 BC, I don't remember. But it wouldn't have looked much different. And you've got the Pharaoh, the Grand Canal of the Pharaoh running through there. And just pretty amazing. If you're into history, you're a historian, go and look that up and watch that just for the fun of it. It'll suck you right in. So go take a look at it. Hawk says, do you think Zahi Hawass is hiding the truth of ancient Egypt history? I'm not a fan. I used to do a mean Zahi Hawass. Come to Egypt. It is safe. Zahi Hawass. But Zahi Hawass, I've got mixed reviews, mixed feelings on him. John Ward did not like him very well. And he's the face of Egyptian history and archaeology. And I do know this, that when they started excavating at Avaris, the old city of the Hebrews, that Pyramses was built over, or renamed Pyramses. It's the same city. That the archaeologists had to be very careful. If they were biblical archaeologists, they couldn't say that they were trying to uncover the Hebrew city. They would have been taken right out of and disallowed and kicked out of Egypt. Political reasons. They don't want to give Israel a claim to anything in Egypt. And so that's always been a really touchy thing. And I was going to make a point with that, and I don't know what it was. But there you go. Yeah, my audio hasn't cut out as much. There are numerous witness testimonies alleging Hawass concealed evidence, including possible hidden structures, restricted excavations beneath the Sphinx, Great Pyramid sighting, national security. Yeah, I don't doubt it for a minute. I think that there are things that our government has hidden. Why not the Egyptian government too? I think there are definitely things that they don't want people knowing about. Or they don't want it exploited before they've had a chance to fully research it, excavate it, so on. Structures beneath the pyramids, yeah, they're going to obscure that until they know what the hell they're dealing with. So yeah, I think that happens. So there we go. Wow. We went for about 50 minutes here with the Captain's Cabin, our post show. Anybody, here's your last chance. I'm going to one more time. I'll just put the invite up here. If you've got a question, got about 3 minutes. 3 minutes. And you can use that link and call right into my studio. And we'll take it from there. So, everybody, there was a quick impromptu lesson. Even though the main presentation of the Captain's Log was not impromptu, this whole thing was just, let's answer some more questions about it. And so if you want to read more about it, you can go find my book at Amazon, The Exodus Reality, and it's subtitled Uncovering the Real Pharaoh of the Exodus. And so it's a big, long subtitle. And John had an opposing theory, and it was interesting. His theory is very cool, but I think he's wrong. I told him, so, you're wrong. And he just placed it 80 years later in the same dynastic family and just thought it was a different person. And so his theory was interesting. You know what's fun? I'm going to toot my horn a little bit. I was watching a thing on YouTube not a couple of years ago now, and I was watching a thing on YouTube. Is this the face of Moses? Was the title, and you see a statue. And I go, oh, that's a statue of Senenmut. And so I went to look at it, and about 10 minutes in, the guy's quoting my book. And this is a guy from some biblical institute that does a lot of this kind of work and presentation work. I'm like, oh! Called my wife, hey, he's talking about my book. And there was another one too like that. So it was very cool. Tracy says, is the book opinion-based? How do you mean by that? I state historical opinion, archaeological opinion. It's not a book about theology, if that's what you mean. But it is a book that is, it was endorsed by the Church, not Church of England. I can't think of who it was. A big church organization in England that endorsed the book, and they said, while John presents a great theory, we go along with Scotty's theory more because it fits the biblical account. And that was it. John was a biblical minimalist, and I was a biblical maximalist, you could say. I said, I believe the Bible account is accurate and true. And I always say, when you're studying that, you can't go and say, the Bible's true and I got to go find history to prove it. No, you say, okay, here's the account. Let's set that aside. Let's see what history says. And they line up. So that was the beautiful thing. Yes, it is factually based, Tracy. It's not opinion based, it's factually based. Historical. Opinion, there's a couple of places where I say, I'm going to speculate about this. So I have a speculation. One of my speculations, which I was going to use for the novelization of this, which would have been a lot of just, writing a book, writing fiction, historical fiction. But I had, what's the word I'm looking for? Speculated in that book with no historical proof that Senenmut, Moses, was the father of Hatshepsut's child, of whom he was the tutor. So, and I had also speculated that they were the same age. There's a man named Rechmir who became the Grand Vizier after Senenmut disappeared, remained the Grand Vizier for the next 40 years under Tutmosis III. Tutmosis III becomes co-regent in his 80s with his son, Amenhotep II, who is the pharaoh of the Exodus, by the way. And for 5 years, he's co-regent with his son. Rechmir, now in his 80s, becomes the Grand Vizier for Amenhotep II. And then Moses appears on the scene. This is somebody he would have known. This is somebody, his contemporary, somebody he would have gone to the school of the nobles with. Somebody, and the speculation I made up was that there was a rivalry between the two. And it was Senenmut, Moses, who became the Grand Vizier and got all the royal titles under Hatshepsut, while Rechmir did not. And there was a bitterness that grew, and I said there was an interesting thing. I'm going to give you this. This is a speculation, but it's speculative based on history. The Grand Viziers in Egypt were pharaoh in the place of pharaoh. That means if the pharaoh was off campaigning and gone from Egypt, the Grand Vizier was the pharaoh of Egypt until his return. He had all the power granted him. With obvious limitations. He couldn't depose the pharaoh, things like that. And so here's the interesting thing. Through the whole account of the plagues leading up to the Exodus, you've got this battle going on between Moses and the pharaoh. Then it's really interesting. After the slaves leave, after the plague of the firstborn, they leave, they exit Egypt. It's got Pharaoh coming into the court and saying, "Where are my slaves? Where have they all gone?" Well, wasn't he there for the 10 plagues? Didn't he see what just happened over the previous weeks? Now, Amenhotep II would have been the pharaoh. He would have been about 23 years old at this time. He had led 5 successful military campaigns out of the country in that first 5 years. And and then what does he tell his army? He says, "Mount up. We're going to chase these slaves down." Well, it's very possible. Here's the scenario I set up in my head. I didn't know if I was going to take this tack in the book or not, but it was a speculation I was working with. He was gone on campaign, and the pharaoh that Moses encountered was none other than Rechmir, the Grand Vizier, who was acting as pharaoh in the place of Pharaoh, his old rival. And this intensified the hatred and the animosity toward Moses. And there was one scene, one of the plagues, where it says, "And Moses in the vernacular said," he gave his decree to Pharaoh, and then he turned on his heel and exited in great anger, and the whole court of Pharaoh were afraid of Moses. That's the reaction of people who knew who this guy was, and the rivalry perhaps that he had with the Pharaoh, Rechmir, acting as the Pharaoh. Then the Pharaoh returns. "Where's my slaves?" And turns around and says to his army, "Mount back up. We just got home. Mount up. We're going out." And he takes all his chariots and chases down Israel, and we know the story from there. And it's very funny that Rechmir, after the point of the Exodus, the date, Rechmir is no longer the Grand Vizier of Egypt. He's just kind of gone. He either died or he had some business with the pharaoh after that. That's a speculation. So, Tracy, that is a speculation not based on real history, but based on historical factoids that could be used to create that scenario. I don't know if that's true. See ya, Hawk. Have a good night. And you know what, folks? I got to go too. I talked even more than I said I was going to. It is now 10 o'clock. We started 1 hour ago with the Captain's Log. I want to thank you all for being here. Thank you for giving me your time. And we will be back tomorrow night with another Captain's Log. So in the meantime, stay the course.